Hello. Hello, everybody. So welcome back to the hit sequel to last year's Only Fish panel. You mean to tell me that's a real fish? Again. So this time, the premise of last year was we were looking at a lot of really weird and strange fish, but it was right a little bit too close to when the Dawn Trail had launched. So this time around, we're going to exclusively talk about Dawn Trail fish because there's a ton of really weird fish in there. And I'm going to very, very broadly use the term fish. So whenever I say fish, just imagine I'm using air quotes. Because some of these are like, that's a fish. And then the other ones are like, that's a fish? So anyways, before we get started, if you want a better look, for those of you who are here at the convention, maybe you're way in the back vending, if you can see the screen right now, there is a QR code. If you want to scan that, that should take you straight to the slide deck where I have all of the slides for this. I would suggest not skipping ahead because there is going to be a pop quiz very quickly. After that, you can skip ahead. I don't care. But don't skip past the pop quiz. Or you can go to that URL. You can reference that for a while. I'll pretty much keep this slide deck just sitting in my Google Drive for a while. So if you want to reference it later, you can. All right. So, really quick question of who am I? My name is Fruity Snacks. Many of you may know me as that fish guy from Twitter or X or social media or YouTube. I make fishing guides for Final Fantasy XIV. You're welcome. I am what many would call insane because I am a fisher main. It is pretty much, at least over the past 5+ years, pretty much the class that I spend the most time on. It is the thing that I do. There are literally dozens of us, and I'm not joking. But the other things that I do is that I am the founder of the Arizine Museum Network, which is a really cool thing if you like in-game museums. I see some people cheering. Woo. And I am the owner of the Arizine Aquarium on Crystal, and I also support the one on Spriggan and Sophia as well, but they are led by some of my friends. So, I started this panel out last year because this is a really good quote from FanFest, where they said Final Fantasy XIV is a fantasy game that is grounded in reality. And what this basically means is that I can now start drawing very easy lines between the game and real life, especially for the fish. Because of the 1,700 plus fish in the game, I can pretty much count on both of my hands the fish that aren't based on real life fish. And even then, the number is even smaller because you can still find the references to what they're actually referring to. It's a lot of fish. And fishing in this game is also quite realistic. I apologize for the graphical thing there. That's just how the export came out. But I'll explain what I get to do now later. Fishing is very realistic. So a really quick primer. How many people here have fish in game? I'm assuming at least a few of you. Yeah, that's pretty much everybody. Holy crap. Talk about your target demographic. So you have pretty much already know that fishing is somewhat realistic in the sense that there are different types of fishing personalities. Some fish are very shy. Some fish are very aggressive, like barramundis. Some fish don't even bite at all, like Cinder Surprise. You have various types of water that you can catch fish in. We're going to ignore all the other fanciful types of things that you can fish into in Final Fantasy XIV, but like saltwater, freshwater, slightly brackish water, that's all represented. Fish that are available during certain times of day. This is something that I see as an actual person who goes out and fishes in real life. It's better for some fish to be caught in the middle of the day when the sun is nice and high because they like the warm water, and that's when it's usually quite warm. Some fish like it in the morning when it's not warm. I'm looking at you, various forms of trout that just don't want to bite. And same thing with weather. It all comes down to like water temperature. That's a whole other panel that I'm just not going to get into. And a lot of the bait and tackle that you use is also based on real life bait and tackle. Red maggots, my bane right now. Mayflies, very common in fly fishing. These are all based on real life things that you see. Stardust, not actually a real life thing. I had somebody point that out to me when I made that point like a while ago. They're like, Stardust isn't real. I'm like, only in your imagination. But basically, because of this, because this is all very realistic, I get to actually have this panel. So, we're going to start with a pop quiz. Now, how many of you were here last year at Gateway Fate? Welcome back. How many of you were also at my panel last year when I talked about this? Welcome back. Thank you. Thank you for coming. If you didn't catch it, I do have a recording of it on my YouTube channel that you can go back and watch, the prequel to this one. But basically, this pop quiz is going to be, I am going to show you a Final Fantasy XIV fish. And I want you to raise your hand if you think it is based on a real-life fish. It's very simple. You've all raised your hand, so I know you can do this. All right, we're going to start off really nice and easy. This is Hydro Luvar. It's caught in living memory. Is it based on a real-life fish? How many of you think it's based on a tuna? Okay, that's actually very surprising. It is not based on a tuna, though it looks like it. It's actually closer to surgeonfish. But it is based on a real-life fish called a luvar, and its forehead is as big as you think it is. All right, everyone's favorite. All right. This one everyone should be able to get. Is it based on a real fish or not? Yes, everyone's hand should be going up for this one. All right. Is a jawless fish called Sacabombapsis. A bit of a mouthful, and you're looking at this picture and you're like, Fruity, that's not what I've seen. This is what it actually would look like. This is kind of like more of a render. It's not as cute. It's a little more menacing. It looks like an armored tadpole. This is a prehistoric fish. There are a lot of prehistoric fish in Final Fantasy XIV, but this was back when fish were trying to figure out what fish was. It was really just a sense of discovery before they understood what jaws were. There are a few other jawless fish in Final Fantasy XIV. The one that you might remember is the legendary fish Drepanapsis, caught in the fringes. But just because I know everyone wants to see it, this is probably what you've seen Sacabombaptis represented as, which is just a museum exhibit, I think in Sweden. It's adorable. If you also look, you can kind of see the split here, and I'm going to start doing the fun little thing that I get to do now. Is if you look at the split here, it's not working. There we go. You can kind of see the eyes here. They totally just like match up. You can totally see that that's what that is. There ain't a thought in that guy's head. All right, so moving on. This is the fun little surprise that I learned literally this morning. I get to draw on my slides. All right, Pixel Loach. This is the big and only big fish caught in Solution 9 in the residential district. You're just randomly fishing in a park. Is this based on a real-life fish? Yes or no? Raise your hand if yes. I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Very good. Very good. I've made it a little easier this year. It is, in fact, based on a Hillstream Loach. These guys are kind of fun. I did a panel before on fish that live in very extreme and weird areas. Hillstream Loach came up once because these guys climb waterfalls. They just kind of come up to a waterfall, they look up and go, yeah, I can do this. And they'll just start climbing up of it. They have they have a couple of mechanisms that allow them to do that. I don't remember what it is specifically. But they are able to climb up rocks, climb up large waterfalls. I would highly recommend looking them up on YouTube because they're really cute too when they do it. All right, next one, my personal favorite. Is the Zoger Condor based on a real-life fish? And you're probably going, seriously? Really? Is it based on a real-life fish? I see that. I'm going to hold you to that. The answer is no, obviously. It is not based on a real-life fish, but it is based on a condor. This is actually the, I'm going to say second or third time that we've actually had a fish that was a bird that you could catch. The other ones pretty much showed up in the diadem or were weird prehistoric fish that you can catch in the churning mist. But for those of you who are curious, this is actually classified as seafood in-game. So yeah, this is also, I believe, I have to double check my notes, but I believe this is a turkey vulture specifically. So there, you may have seen this before. I have these circling around my house. I don't know what that means, but they just go around in a circle, just go woo. It's kind of cool, actually. All right, the Ixrax leaffish. This is going to be the second to last one. Is this based on a real-life fish? I see some people going, yeah, maybe it's a leaf or fish leaves. Is this another one of those pixie fish that, like, guy fell into the water and he turned into a book? Sunken Tome, anyone who cares? But yeah, so this is actually based on the Amazon leaffish. These guys are pretty cool, and there's a fun little... Well, these guys are pretty cool because they'll just kind of float in the water like they're dead leaves, and they'll just eat whatever thing comes by, and that's how they defend themselves against predators. An interesting thing, too, is in Final Fantasy XIV, you can have aquariums. Surprise. Ixrax leaffish was added a couple of patches ago, and we noticed that it doesn't have an animation of moving around. You put it into a tank and it'll follow the path that a fish will follow if you put it into a tier 3 or a tier 4 tank, but it doesn't have any flipper motion. And we don't know if that's actually a bug. I did report it as a bug, but we don't know if that's a bug or if it's just an homage to the fact that these guys don't really move that much. They just kind of drift in the water and hope that food comes by. All right, this is the very last one. Okay, calm down. Is Muttering Matamata based on, I'm going to say, a real-life creature, or is it a mythological creature? So is it a real-life creature? All right, I see some people. Is it based on a mythological creature? Okay, if you thought mythological creature, congratulations, you're wrong. This is a Matamata. So Matamata are... Okay, honestly, they were like really under-researched. I wanted to do a bigger section on these, and it's not going to be very big because there is not a lot of research on Matamatas specifically that I could find. And what I could find, a lot of it I couldn't understand because it was in Spanish. And Google Translate was very sketchy with scientific articles. But the Matamata is considered to be pretty dragon-like. And it is native to Central America. It eats live fish. It kind of lives in these swamps. It has and I'll show this later, it has like this weird little snout that it lets it just kind of sit underneath the water's surface and put its snout up and just breathe. So it's like this little tiny hole in the water, and it's breathing. It's very cute. The term Matamata is translated in a few different ways. In Tupi-Guarani, it is translated as kills a lot. But I have a friend who also lives in the region, and I asked him about this, and like, what does Matamata really stand for? And he goes, technically that's correct, but I've also heard it as bad turtle, but not like a bad turtle. More like it's just a really like evil turtle, like not a very good turtle. He did also want to point out that you don't want to step on them because they really hurt. I mean, look at the back of that shell. That's a rough shell. That's like worse than Lego. And we actually see a little bit of the real life connections in 14. So there is the pleated Matamata, which is a small version of Muttering, the average sized or the not big version of Muttering Matamata. And it does talk about how it can camouflage into its shell, and it talks about how it lives among leaves and the trees and the fallen things. And that's what we actually see with the real life Matamata. For those of you who can't see it, it's right here. These guys will hide around, and this is why my friend said don't step on them, because it is actually kind of easy to miss them. And I think from what I'm understanding of the research that I have read on Matamata, like I was mentioning, it's kind of thin. They're also a little hard to find. Because they're so well camouflaged, and because of how they actually can live. So if I can, oh no, I just reset everything. That's not good. So if I fix what I just did, no, stop, come on. All right, we're just gonna leave that top part there. So anyways, if we talk about what I was mentioning earlier, they have that little snout. And that little snout is right there, that little bit of nose that you can see right here. These guys are able to basically sit underwater, and they'll just stick their little nose up, and that's how they are able to breathe. And we actually see their ecosystem pretty well represented a bit. Here, they like to live in these marshy type swamps areas where they can kind of rest in the kind of in the shallows, and they stick their little nose up and they breathe, and then they eat whatever small fish comes by. Here in Bopo'ui'i, I may have botched that a little bit, and I apologize. I was practicing that in the mirror before I came here. Didn't work very well. But this is where you can catch the pleated matamata and muttering matamata. How many people have actually caught muttering matamata? How many people took more than 10 windows to catch muttering matamata? Okay. This is where it is, and they're actually pretty similar in style of like rivers that are a little wet, very damp areas where they can live. But they are spread out amongst a good portion of South America, so it isn't this exclusively, but the ones that I was researching, this was kind of the ecosystem that they lived in. Okay, so one of the big parts of the Dawn Trail story, and at least the world that we explore in Dawn Trail, was pockmarked with cenotes. How many people actually knew about cenotes and before playing Dawn Trail? And how many people learned about cenotes after playing Dawn Trail? Yeah, they're really cool. I knew about them a little bit, and I didn't know as much as I wanted to, so I did a whole lot of research on this. And once again, the research was kind of thin. The thing that I'm learning is that a lot of South American ecology is, from my perspective, and at least from where I'm looking, it's hard to find the research because some of it's hard to get to. The one thing that we'll learn here about cenotes is that they're also kind of rough. They're not really great places for life, yet they do have life. All right, so for those of you who don't know already what cenotes are or are just learning, they are these naturally occurring pits, kind of similar to sinkholes, but basically they are sinkholes that have been eroded away by water, and they expose groundwater to the surface. You see them a lot in around the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Especially, they kind of form like the edge of the crater that was in that region from many years ago when the meteor fell. And they can extend into large underground caverns, which is part of the reason why they are so dangerous and why they are also so interesting, at least to me, because they're a very weird place for fish and creatures to live, and fish and creatures do live there. In cenotes, you can find a whole variety of fish. You can find guppies, you can find mollies, you can find eels, you can find all these different types of species living in these basically holes in the ground with just a whole bunch of fresh water. And this is very interesting because when I was looking, the actual amount of fish, this was an image that I found, and this basically summarizes the diversity of fish that I could find. When you compare the biodiversity of fish in cenotes to, say, something of like a river or a ocean even, and we'll just ignore the reefs because that's just cheating, it isn't very large. There isn't a ton of life that can live there, and the life that does live there is very adapted to living in cenotes and caves and all that type of fun stuff. Now, if you've been paying attention to the fish that you are catching in cenotes or some of the big fish, you may recognize some of these guys. For example, if I bring up the drawing thing, I learned how to do this today, and so we are going to use it. I even have a pencil for it. This guy comes up a fair bit. We have a bunch of turtles. These guys are in Yoctel. There is actually a pseudo-hidden spearfishing hole. I don't know if anyone's actually noticed this in like this northwest corner. You can only access it from flying, and there is no ground to land your mount on. You literally land in the water and just start swimming or go under the water. But I remember that because there's a lot of turtles. The mollies are there. We talk about them a little bit. And then cichlids come up a fair bit in 14. The catfish are there. The gobies are there. How many went for chain shark? If you went for chain, yeah, I see some people doing that. And some people going, chain shark, we'll talk about him in a little bit. He's fun. But like the gobies are there. So we have a whole lot of different fish here that are already represented on this list, and there's actually a whole lot more that could be represented in the future should they decide to expand on any new fish that actually show up. I should probably also circle that guy. But if we actually look at the cenotes and the soles, and I'll explain what the difference is, they're pretty much what you would expect to find if you were, say, to travel to Mexico and explore your own cenotes. They're just large holes in the ground with water of various sizes. There's a lot of sedimentary. I'm going to try and get this right. I'm looking at the geologists in the audience right now. There's a lot of basically, these cenotes are formed when a limestone or calcium dome of some sort kind of gets eroded away to the water, and that gets exposed onto the surface, which causes the hole, which is why they're kind of circular and dome-ish. But you see a lot of the stratification of the walls. You can kind of see that here in the corner on the right-hand side. The one on the left is in the lower Yoctel. But when you're playing the game, you will hear cenotes and soles used somewhat interchangeably because they are basically the exact same thing. It's just that the different cultures of Yoctel, the Mamuk in the lower part refer to them as cenotes, and in Ixbrax, they are referred to as soles. So the fishing holes are actually representative of this as well. They're not different. They're not really much different. It's just the regional occupants are just using different names for them. Just a fun little detail that I noticed with that when we were playing through. But that diversity is also represented here in Final Fantasy XIV. Here's a few examples. So we have, I use the Ixrax sailfin here in the upper right or upper left, ankle deep catfish, Veritas, and then shark-nosed goby. We see these all represented, and these are all pictures of fish in cenotes in Mexico and around Mexico and those in that surrounding region. So we have that representation there. As we have seen, throughout some of Dawn Trail, a lot of that region and the different regions are pulled from different parts of South America. The fish are no different. All right, so we're going back to chain shark. I'm sorry if this is going to upset anybody. Chain shark is the not legendary, excuse me. We're not there yet. Chain shark is the high script fish. It's worth 1,000 orange script at the time of recording this. It is caught in a sole specifically, and this is a type of fish that sets a record in Final Fantasy XIV. It is a very large coastal fish. It currently sets it's one of the largest coastal fishes that you can catch. And on the right is a picture that I took actually about a month ago in Toronto at Ripley's Aquarium. Those are chain sharks. They are not as big as you would expect them to be. There was actually probably like 10 of them in an aquarium. I don't know, maybe about from like here over to here. For those of you who are watching at home, it's like a 6-foot diameter or 6-foot diagonal of a rectangle here. It is not. They aren't very big. And we see this sometimes with fish represented in Final Fantasy XIV where their sizes are not necessarily 100% accurate. They do kind of pull the whimsy on some of these fish. And chain shark is no different. The other fun thing is chain shark, despite the name, is not technically a shark. What? I've been lied to. Why, Yoshi P, why would you do this? No, chain shark is actually a catfish. What? Another one. Yeah, there is a species of catfish, or a variety of catfish that are referenced to as sharks. This is not the first time you have been duped. Chain shark is actually one of many catfish sharks that we've had. If you have the earliest one that I can think of off the top of my head without referring back to my notes, which I don't have speaker notes in this particular version, so I sacrificed speaker notes to be able to draw. Chain shark, if you have gone fishing under the Dawn Throne in Azim Steppe, there is the grass shark. It looks like a little cute little dolphin. It's like got a little nose, and it's called the grass shark. It's a catfish. You literally getting catfished. If you go ocean fishing on the Ruby route, I believe it is the Yanksha, there is a fish called fishy shark. Once again, it's a catfish. You are never going to look at sharks the same way again. But don't worry, a lot of the sharks that you think of are actually sharks. A lot of the sharks that you don't think are sharks are probably catfish. Okay. We're gonna do another game here. I know everyone loves this. All right, so these are two Final Fantasy XIV fish. I promise they're real Final Fantasy XIV fish. We have blind Brotula and twig catfish. Catfish is kind of the name of the section right now, I guess. How many people think that blind Brotula might be a fish that you would find in a cenote? Okay. This is sort of like a pop quiz to see if you were paying attention. What about twig catfish? Is this a fish that you're going to find in some of them? I see some people raising your hands. Okay. So I guess the question is, do anyone think that either of these are completely made up fish and not based on anything at all? Okay, good, cool. We're learning. For those watching at home, nobody raised their hand, and that's good. They're both real. And they're both basically named the same way. However, the blind Brutula is the one that is actually caught in, I say catch. It does live in cenotes, specifically in the cave system. Cenotes can go very deep. They can go very, very, very deep, some to the point where you can't explore them deep. Like, we've buried signs underwater that if you're scuba diving saying, don't go any farther, you will die. We don't know what's going on. Twig catfish are not typically found in cenote, but they are found in rivers around Venezuela. But they were kind of cute, so I wanted to include them, and I want to try and get as many of these cool and weird Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail fish as I can. Blind Brutola, despite this is one of the issues with pictures of fish, is that they rarely have a scale. So here's a picture of Blind Brutola and another fish of Blind Brutola with a little bit more of a background, and you'll find that they're about yay big. For those of you watching at home, I'm putting up my hand, and it's about 2 inches. They aren't very large. It's kind of like that picture of the anglerfish. Has anyone seen that one too recently, where it's like you see a picture of an anglerfish, and you're like, this thing is massive. And then you see what it actually looks like in the palm of the guy's hand, and it's like smaller than the palm, and it looks adorable. That's kind of what's going on here. But Blind Brutola, they have adapted themselves to live in cenotes in the dark. They do not have eyes, hence the names. They are adapted for cave life. They are adapted to basically live on whatever they can eat, whatever happens to fall down there, and it isn't a lot. Really not much at all, because it's a deep cave underwater. There's a lot of pressure, not a lot of oxygen. Nothing really wants to live down there. So this is a very interesting fish because it is very specialized to live in the area that it is basically now living. They have to adapt to that type of thing, and we see this with a lot of other fish as well, where they adapt to the low oxygen, weird salinity of cenotes. All right, so we are now going to move our way from the rough region of Central America and the Yucatan and cenotes, and we are going to go to what I believe the community referred to as Arizona. Or Zoger. Zoger here is For those of you who are maybe still making your way through Dawn Trail, this is in Shaolane. Zoger, eastbound and westbound Zoger are two sky fishing holes off the giant rift of the bridge that you cross from Tuliololal, and it has a lot of interesting fish. I mentioned one earlier, that was the condor, and it has some other weird fish. And when I mean weird fish, I mean really weird fish, air quotes. Yeah, and people are like, are those fish, really? And I'm like, Game says they're seafood. Yeah, the game does say a lot of things, but the one rule that we have found is if you can catch it with a fishing rod, it is seafood. Did you catch a griffin? It's a seafood. Did you catch a condor? It's a seafood. That bug you caught? It's a seafood. That bucket you caught? Still seafood. It's okay because there's a goldfish in it, with a frog in it too, or something. Magic bucket, rarest fish in the game by bite rate. It's lower than any other fish that we know of. And if you're having trouble catching it, make sure you have snagging turned on. That's the public service announcement for that. All right, so I want to start with Zoger cores. If you've fished throughout the game's history from A Realm Reborn up until now, this type of fish may seem familiar to you, the just like weird orb of something. If you have, unironically, I actually pondered the orbs here for a while. Yeah. So basically, all of these are based off really one type of species of thing, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to point out that what you're seeing right now, it looks like it's a hardened, kind of like an orbish, maybe crystalline thing. I'm going to just point out that the game represents these guys in two different ways, but they're all based on the same thing. Sometimes they're like hardened crystal. You'll see that with hard candy if you fish in Lakeland. Sometimes they are not represented as something like hard and crystalline. They are more represented as soft, like Moggle Mogpom, caught in Greenward in the Churning Mist, which is fun little lore about Moggle Mogpom is that they assume it is the palm of departed Moogles. So if you're thinking like, oh yeah, what am I fishing up? It's the palm of a dead Moogle. It's weird. That's just the thing that we're going to get into. But anyways, the Zoger core and other type of orb-like creatures all do come from something called Maramos. Now, Maramos, they do have a named fish in the game. You can catch it in Korthus. You can even craft them into a lamp, and they glow, called Lamp Maramo. These guys are, despite what the pictures say, or despite what the pictures are showing, and despite the fact that you can just buy these online in like literal cans, people keep them as pets. They are a rare form of algae that, due to currents and due to the way that the algae is put together, it forms a sphere. And so that's what Maramos are effectively here in this case. They're just spherical algae. This is closer to how the, what was I just saying? Mogpoms. Those are represented. You'll see those this type of like soft body algae. You do see that reference in Maramo based fish in game. So if you want to own one of these, you can literally just go online, like I said, and order them, and they're like $20. You get like 3 in a little jar, and people keep them as pets. It's apparently really big in Japan. That's what I learned. All right, Vagrant Cascades. How many people actually think that this is just like absolutely made up, and I'm finally throwing out like a fake fish? All right, one brave hand is going to call me out on this, and you're wrong. Technically, so Vagrant Cascade is you see like this weird faint glow. It kind of looks weird. It's like a tube. Vagrant Cascade is technically a colony of pyrosomes, and they'll form these long tube-like structures. Sometimes they can be, there's a human there for scale. You can see they're like 6-10 feet long. I have read reports that these guys can grow much longer. They can grow much wider to the point where a diver can just swim into one. I don't know what happens if you do that. Don't know if I want to try. But there are these long colonies, and it's a colonial type animal that just kind of forms and just floats around in the water. Not too dissimilar from coral. Coral, though, creates the hard outer shell, which is what creates the coral reefs that we are all aware of. In this case, they just create this weird goop that they all just kind of float around in a tube. Yeah, I'm also, now that I'm just saying that, I'm trying to think about, like, this is a sky fishing area. So you're just you're basically just casting off into a cliff, into this rift between the continents that you don't know how deep it is. And I'm just trying to imagine what these guys look like if I'm just like looking over the edge of the cliff. And it's like, oh, that's a Vagrant Cascade going by. It's just like a giant balloon floating through the air. I'm just now realizing the visualization of that in my head. That would be really strange and mildly terrifying. Okay, for those of you, I won't ask you if this is based on a real fish or not, because it's not based on a real fish. It is an insect. For those of you who may be slightly uncomfortable with weird-looking insects, I am going to warn you now, this one is very weird. So this one actually, when I was working on this, you may have seen me post on Blue Sky about this terrifying revelation. Part of this Zoger section is actually spawned on by this specific fish. Because I was looking at it, I was like, oh, that's just a scorpion. I hate scorpions. It has wings. Now I really hate scorpions. And now I'm like, hold on, do scorpions actually have wings? And this led me down this whole rabbit hole of scorpions with wings. And I learned that they do not have wings, but they can sometimes have structures on their bellies that look like wings, kind of looks almost feather-like, that is used for sense of smell and sensing the ground and whatever scorpions do when they need to use that sense. I don't like to think about it very much. And I felt a little comforted by that. And then I remembered that this fish is actually a recolor of another fish in game that you can catch in Heaven's Word called a scorpion fly. And so I Googled scorpion fly. I made a mistake. Oh boy, this really ruined my morning. So scorpion flies are a real thing. And that is typically, they're not 100% what is being represented in this case, but they're terrifying enough that I'm going to share that with everybody. Scorpion flies are found a lot throughout the U.S., which was also terrifying when I found out that in my current home state of New Jersey, they live there. Oh, why did you tell us this? Because you all now get to share in my misery. Oh, for those of you who didn't hear that, someone was like, I go, oh, I want you to all share in my misery. And someone's like, we're already in misery. If you were in the fish cord, you would get the dad tag for that immediately. Okay, give me your name. You're getting the dad tag. So, all right. So I want to assure everybody, though, that these guys aren't going to be flying into your face in the middle of May. That's a mayfly. They're also weird, but that's fine. Scorpion flies are not as active as you would think they are, thankfully. Scorpion flies, that is not a stinger. That is I'm trying to think of how to put this in a family-friendly way, which should probably tell you what it is. Yeah, you kind of get that thing. It's a body part that just happens to look like a stinger. which I don't know if that makes it better or worse. They fortunately do not have claws like scorpions. These guys are insects. Scorpions are arachnids. They are not venomous. Thankfully, you're not going to find them on your wall climbing around. They are not bioluminescent. They don't have any form of luminescence, unlike scorpions, which glow under UV light, which is also terrifying. But the one kind of saving grace for me was they are not something that you will just see flying around your garden. If you do, you may want to call the cops, because these guys are usually found around dead and dying organic matter, specifically like roadkill. So unless you're dealing with roadkill often, you probably aren't going to be running into these guys. So don't worry. This is how I was able to save myself, unless I'm interacting with a dead body. Usually after a day or two. That was the other fun thing that I learned. It takes about a day or two for these guys to show up. You're not really going to run into them very much. But it is still terrifying that scorpion flies and Zogre condor and the Zogre scorpion are based on actual insects. And that is very discomforting for me. We're just going to move on to the end here. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my panel for now. If you have any questions about what was talked about, or fishing in Final Fantasy XIV, or just anything in general about Final Fantasy XIV, we have about 20 more minutes. I went through this a little bit quicker than I was expecting, and that just leaves a lot more time for questions. So does anyone have any questions at all about anything? All right, I'm going to come down here. We're going to do this thing where I'm just going to walk the mic over so you can, is that okay with you? Okay.
Are pyrostomes filter feeders?
Are pyrosomes filter feeders? I'm going to make an assumption and say yes, but I couldn't find an actual answer on that. That would make sense based on what it is, but they could also be closer to, like, say, algae, where they're more like chemosynthesis or photosynthesis. I nailed that. It's pronunciation, yeah. But I didn't actually see a whole lot on what they feed on, but I should say I didn't find anything conclusive on what they feed on, so I don't have a solid answer on that. Any other question? Okay, we got a question over here. Please don't give me feedback. Microphone. You can all give me feedback.
You're great. What about the upside down fish in, I think, Churning Mists?
Okay, so we'll depart from Dawn Trail here for a second. So the upside down, there's a fish called the capsized squeaker or the Dravanian squeaker. There's a variety of them. This is a fish that you can put into an aquarium. You can see them at the Arisian Aquarium. Shameless plug. When you put them in, they are swimming upside down. This is not a bug. This is actually called out in their guide and their lore, that they swim upside down, and no one understands why, but they think it's a defensive measure. They are based on real-life fish called the aptly named upside-down catfish. It's the catfish. It's not a shark. Boy, an upside-down shark would be also terrifying. But no, so the upside-down catfish is a real thing. I've actually seen them. They're in a few aquariums around me in New Jersey. You probably can go to your local aquarium and find them yourselves. But they do swim upside down. They do not always swim upside down. It is not something that they regularly do, like we are led to believe in Final Fantasy XIV. But they can be seen swimming upside down, and that's considered their natural state for some odd reason. Okay, we're moving over here. Okay, no mic. What's the question? Okay, the question was, can you give us examples of fish that are completely made up in game? Yes, so fish that are not based on real life fish include Aquamaton, sidereal whale, technically Magic Bucket. This was a joke I made last year, was Magic Bucket's based on just a tin bucket you can buy on Amazon. But you're gonna be looking at fish like Aquamaton. Aquamaton is a fish that in lore it's really just like a steampunk-ified fish for the most part. But in the lore, in the game, Aquamaton was developed by the dwarves for underwater mining operations. And when they released it into the water to you start mining, it, and I quote, got excited and ran away like a puppy. It is also seafood. It is also one of 3 inorganic fish. So one of the other fish that is not based on a real fish, technically, would be gobby mask. That's caught, or sunken mask, sorry. That's caught in ocean fishing. That's the intuition trigger for bearface. That is a fun bit of lore. Basically, it was implied that this cute little octopus wears the mask as like a home or like a shell in a way. And when you catch it, you rip it off the octopus, and it's kind of upset about that. I would be too. Hence the intuition trigger, and so it tries to retrieve the mask that you tried to that you caught. So that's another one. Sidereal whale. Everyone, calm down. I know that that's rough for some people. Sidereal whale is not based on a real life fish, nor is it really based on visually anything. It kind of looks like a humpback whale in a way, but it isn't really it's not really based on anything real because it is called out to be related to the lunar whale in lore. I'm trying to think through some of the weird fish that we've seen. If you want to look for really weird fish, and I talked about these a little bit last year, Ultima Thule. Most of those fish are based on deep sea horrors. There was a couple of fish there. I think it was class 24. That was one of the fish where we were like, that we couldn't match class 24 for a while, and then someone finally found that, okay, yeah, no, this is based off of a real life fish. I'm trying to think of what some of the other fish are. I know that there's more than 3, but I am now blanking on what they are, and they're usually very strange things. Warden of the Seven Hues is technically based on koi, but you don't see the same pigmentation in koi, so that's a bit of a stretch. But that one does exist there. Pseudo exists as well. Any other? Okay, I see 3 questions. Wow, we are multiplying.
Ruby dragon and glass dragon.
Yeah, ruby dragon, glass dragon. Those are based on mythology, though. So technically not real. Those are technically not real fish, but they are more mythological fish. Ruby dragon and glass dragon are related in game lore, but that's pretty much about it. I highly recommend you just go check those out. Glass dragon's not as hard to catch as ruby.
I'm curious if you still have any high-quality fish whenever they axed all the high-quality stuff, like in your collection.
I do have a bunch of high-quality fish in my collection. This includes about 132 high-quality Mamora Mora. Who else had a question over it?
You talked about like some prehistoric fish around that they base them off of. What about like Paleozoic, Cambrian explosion type thing?
There are definitely going to be some Cambrian explosion fish. I don't know my time epochs well enough to say who is who. I think Opabinia, Anomalocaris fall under Cambrian explosion, if I'm remembering that correctly. Those both exist. I'm trying to think of the other really weird fish. Helicoprion, thank you. Yeah, Helicoprion would be one of them. If you don't know what Helicoprion looks like, think of a shark, not a catfish. Think of a shark, except instead of its lower jaw, replace that with a saw blade. And it does kind of rotate around in a spiral. It's really weird. Endoceras, I think, might be post-Cambrian explosion or pre. I can't remember where in the explosion it took place. But Endoceras, Captain Chalice is a nautilus, so technically that's kind of close to that one as well. So we do have a few. We do have a lot of other prehistoric fish, Xenocanthus, anything that sounds like canthus. Anything you look at and go, that sounds like an old fish. It probably is. Okay, any other question? Do you have a follow-up? Say again?
Are they in shallow marine environments?
Are they in shallow marine environments? Opabinia is in the flagship, which is not a shallow marine environment. It's a toxic hellhole. Anomalocaris is caught in the Sea of Clouds, which is not a shallow environment. It is a cliff. Some of them are. Endoceras is caught off the coast of the Isles of Umbra. So that one technically, we got one. All right, who had another question? Okay, and you. I'm gonna do them and then you. Okay. I only have 5 minutes, so we gotta be quick here.
What, in your opinion, would be Eorzio's deadliest catch?
I said this. I try and prepare for these very weird and strange questions, and you have just caught me with one I have not prepared for. I heard it when I was walking over. Someone said Problematicus. Yeah, Problematicus would probably be pretty close. If you don't know what Problematicus is, it is the largest fish in the game. It is about, not 1,200. It's 1,092 inches long, which is nearly 100 feet long. And you're like, man, that's a big fish. Where does it live? In a volcano. And where is this volcano? About 100 feet below you. I don't know how Lalafell do it. I don't know how the fishing rod does it. This thing, I did the math on how much this thing might weigh. I was like, what's the density of magma? That was hard to find out. But it's a few hundred tons. So I don't know what the tensile strength on this thing is, but man, I want that fishing rod. And yet, Moratecta still escapes.
It's a little long-winded. Is that okay?
Yes, we have time. You'll be the last question.
Okay. You may remember me. I asked about Cinder Surprise yesterday. So I did a little digging after we chatted about that. And Cinder Surprise has a very similar, if not the same, eye as Sugar, who is the A-rank hunt mark. He's a sandpiste in Amarang. And sandpice are based off of bearded dragons, which technically makes Cinder Surprise the egg of a bearded dragon, and it is seafood. Is Cinder Surprise a fish?
So, okay, so it's a bearded dragon. So we're going to, that's actually very good information. Not something that I had looked into, and I very much appreciate that. So does that make Cinder Surprise a fish? Because Ambling caltrop is a thorned lizard, and it is considered a fish because it is listed as seafood, yes, that would technically make Cinder Surprise a fish, or it counts as caviar. So we'll end on that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Oh, we had a great weekend.